Hello everyone, I'm Marcus, 34 years old, and I work as a systems analyst at a technology company in San Francisco. On the outside, I'm just another regular employee who drives a silver 2015 Honda Civic, wears simple clothes, and eats packed lunches every day. But on the inside, well, that's a completely different story. For years, I built my wealth quietly and intelligently. While my peers spent their entire salaries on imported cars, designer clothes, and expensive restaurants, I invested every spare cent in the stock market. I started small, $500 a month in 2018. I studied, learned, reinvested dividends, and never told anyone about my investments. My philosophy has always been simple: live below your means and invest the difference. While everyone else in the office was going into debt to impress others, I was quietly amassing a fortune that would change my life forever. But at that company party in December 2024, everything changed. The mask of humility slipped, and the truth came out in a way no one expected. What happened that night wasn't just a lesson in humility for my arrogant colleagues. It was the beginning of a calculated revenge that would show everyone that judging someone by their appearance is the biggest mistake you can make. And believe me, their reaction when they discovered who I really was was priceless. But before I continue telling my story and how it all happened, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear where you're from. The company's annual party was always an event I attended out of obligation. December 2024. Marriott Hotel. All the employees gathered to celebrate another year of work. I arrived at the hotel parking lot driving my trusty 2015 Honda Civic, with 180,000 miles on it but still running perfectly. It was a simple car, but economical and reliable. As I parked, I took in the impressive collection of vehicles around me. BMW 3 Series, Audi A4, Mercedes-Benz C-Class, even a red Tesla Model S belonging to Ricardo, the sales manager. All beautiful cars, but also all financed to the limit. I walked toward the hotel entrance when I heard laughter coming from behind. It was the office popular group: Ricardo, Fernanda from accounting, Carlos from marketing, and Amanda from HR, all dressed in expensive clothes, flashy watches, and that aura of superiority that always bothered me. "Look at Marcus arriving with his poor-looking little car," Ricardo said loudly, provoking laughter from the group. "Man, when are you going to show some respect and buy a decent car? You make good money here at the company," Fernanda added with a mischievous smile. "Seriously, Marcus, that Honda must be about 10 years old. Aren't you embarrassed to show up at a fancy party with that thing?" The laughter grew louder, and other classmates began to come over to see what was going on. Carlos, always the most acidic of the group, didn't miss the opportunity. "I bet he still lives with his parents so he can pay for that car in cash." Amanda laughed out loud and said, "Guys, leave Marcus alone. Not everyone can have our standard of living." My blood boiled, but I remained calm. For years, I had grown accustomed to these nasty comments. They didn't know that, at that very moment, I had an investment app on my smartphone showing a wealth of $2.3 million, carefully accumulated over 6 years. I smiled discreetly and replied, "You're right, my car is simple, but it gets me where I need to go." They laughed even harder, interpreting my answer as conformity. If only they knew I could buy all their cars outright and still have money left over. I walked into the hotel with my head held high, but inside I was already planning something. This public humiliation would be my last. It was time to show who I truly was, but in a way they would never forget. Revenge would be served cold, calculated, and devastating. That night, as they sipped champagne and boasted about their material conquests, I was already mentally preparing the next step. Did they want to see money? Because they were going to see money in a way they never imagined possible. Inside the ballroom, the situation only got worse. The decor was impeccable, with round tables draped with white tablecloths, golden lights, and a stunning view of the San Francisco Bay. I sought a discreet table in the corner, but fate would have it that I was directed to the main table, right next to the group that had humiliated me in the parking lot. During dinner, the teasing continued in a more subtle, but still awkward manner. Ricardo made a point of telling the whole table about his new Tesla Model S, financed in 84 installments. Man, it changed my life. Cutting-edge technology, insane acceleration, and best of all, it impacts women, he said, winking at his colleagues. Fernanda wasn't far behind, showing off her Apple Watch Ultra and Louis Vuitton bag. Guys, investing in quality of life is essential. There's no point in saving so much that you don't enjoy life, she said, looking directly at me. Some people live like paupers even though they're millionaires. The irony of her statement almost made me choke on my wine. If only she knew how close she was to the truth. Carlos took the opportunity to show off his Rolex Submariner, a gift he'd given himself after a promotion. I work hard, I deserve the best, he declared proudly. Amanda, always the most direct, decided to include me in the conversation. Marcus, don't you feel down seeing everyone here thriving while you remain the same? The table fell silent, all eyes on me. It was clearly an attempt to publicly humiliate me. I took a deep breath and calmly replied, actually, Amanda, I'm very happy with my life choices. Everyone has their own priorities, she laughed sarcastically. Sure, priorities, like saving up for a new car in 20 years. The group burst into laughter again. I felt my face heat up, but I kept it together. At that moment, I discreetly grabbed my phone and opened my brokerage app. The screen showed my portfolio: Apple APL, $420,000, Tesla TSLA, $380,000, Google GOOGL, $290,000, Microsoft MSFT, $310,000, plus 15 other smaller stocks. Total, $2,347,892, almost $2.5 million I'd accumulated while they were going into debt to save face. I looked at each of them and smiled inwardly. If I wanted, I could buy all their cars, all their houses, and still have money left over for a European vacation, but it wasn't time yet. Revenge needed to be calculated, at the right moment, with maximum impact. I put away my phone and continued eating dinner in silence, mentally planning how I would reveal my true financial situation in a way they would never forget. The company director took the stage to deliver the traditional year-end speech, but I barely paid attention. My mind was busy creating the perfect plan to show these arrogant people that appearances can be deceiving. In the days following the party, the teasing in the office intensified. It was as if that night had given everyone carte blanche to treat me like the company's poor thing. During coffee breaks, I'd hear comments like, "Here comes Marcus with his lunchbox," or "Be careful not to scratch Marcus's car" in the parking lot. But every joke, every giggle, every scornful look only strengthened my resolve. I spent the entire weekend planning my revenge. It wouldn't just be showing them my bank statement. Anyone can forge a document. It had to be public, irrefutable, and devastating to their egos. Inspiration struck on Monday, when Ricardo walked by my desk bragging, "Marcus, did you see that Tesla went up 15% last week? If you had invested in stocks instead of stashing money under your mattress, maybe you would have bought a decent car by now." He laughed at his own joke, unaware that I owned exactly 1,247 shares of Tesla. That's when I had the perfect idea. Our company was organizing a charity auction to raise funds for a local charity. Employees could donate items or services to be auctioned off during the event. Traditionally, donations were modest: dinners, massages, handmade goats. I approached Sandra, the event organizer, and said I wanted to make a special donation. "What kind of donation, Marcus?" she asked curiously. I smiled and replied, "I want to donate $50,000 in cash to the organization." She nearly fell out of her chair. "50,000? Marcus, are you sure? That's a lot of money." I confirmed that it would be the case and asked her to announce it during the presentation on Friday, in front of all the employees. Sandra was ecstatic. It would be the largest individual donation in the company's history. I asked for just one condition: that it be a surprise until the moment of the announcement. During the week, I continued acting normally. I arrived in my Honda Civic, ate my lunch, and wore the same simple clothes as always. Ricardo and his gang continued their teasing, completely oblivious to what was coming. "Marcus, when are you going to stop being such a cheapskate and live a little?" Fernanda asked on Thursday. On Friday morning, I transferred $50,000 from my investment account to my checking account. It was less than 2.5% of my total assets, but to them it would be an astronomical amount. I arrived at the office, as usual, parked my poor man's car, and prepared for what would be the most satisfying day of my career. The event was scheduled for 4 p.m. in the company auditorium. During lunch, I overheard Ricardo commenting, "Man, this auction is going to be pathetic. I bet they'll raise $1,000 at most." If only he'd known that in just a few hours his view of me would completely change. Revenge was just hours away, and I could barely contain my excitement. Finally, these arrogant bastards would find out who really had the last laugh. The auditorium was packed with about 200 employees. I sat discreetly in the back rows, while Ricardo and his team occupied the front rows, always making a point of being seen. The General Director, Mr. Peterson, opened the event by explaining the importance of the charity and how every donation would make a difference. Sandra took the stage to present the donations. She started with the traditional items: a dinner at Carlos's Italian restaurant sold for $200, a financial consulting session with Fernanda $150, even a detailed car wash offered by Ricardo $300, much to my amusement. "And now," Sandra said, with a huge smile, "we have a very special donation that will completely change the outcome of this charity event." The auditorium fell completely silent. Ricardo turned to Amanda and whispered, "It must be some director wanting to show up." Sandra continued, "One of our colleagues, someone who works with us every day, has decided to make the largest individual donation in our company's history." The tension in the air was palpable. "This person, who prefers to keep a low profile in everyday life, will donate $50,000 in cash to our charity." Murmurs of surprise echoed through the auditorium. $50,000 was the annual salary of many employees present. Fernanda turned to Carlos and said, "It must be Peterson trying to show off before retirement." "Marcus Silva," Sandra announced, "please come to the stage to accept our applause for this extraordinary donation." The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to me, many with expressions of complete disbelief. I calmly stood up and walked toward the stage. Ricardo's mouth was literally open. Fernanda had an expression of utter shock. Carlos looked like he'd seen a ghost. Amanda was so surprised she spilled her coffee on her dress. The murmur in the auditorium grew exponentially. How did the poor cart guy have $50,000 to donate? I walked on stage and Sandra handed me the microphone. I looked at the audience, especially the group that had humiliated me. "Thank you, Sandra. I know many of you were surprised by this donation, especially considering I drive a 2015 Honda Civic, can't eat lunch every day." Nervous laughter echoed through the auditorium. I continued, "The truth is, I learned early in life that appearances can be very deceiving. While some spend money to impress others, I preferred to quietly invest in my future." I pulled out my phone and projected my investment app onto the auditorium screen. I currently own a stock portfolio valued at $2.3 million. Tesla, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and other companies I believed in when no one else did. The auditorium erupted. Some applauded, others gasped, but the reaction of the group humiliating me was priceless. Ricardo was pale as a sheet. The revenge was just beginning. The revelation sent shockwaves through the auditorium. Employees who had never spoken to me before approached to greet me and ask questions about investments. But my attention was focused on the group that had humiliated me. Their expressions of shock were exactly what I had long expected to see. After the event, in the parking lot, the situation was completely reversed. Now I was the one receiving looks of admiration and respect. I calmly walked toward my Honda Civic, the same car they had ridiculed just days before. The difference was that now they knew I drove that car by choice, not necessity. Ricardo approached first, clearly uncomfortable. "Marcus, man, I didn't know you were ... well off." I smiled and replied, "Yeah, Ricardo. Sometimes people aren't what they seem to be on the outside." He tried to explain himself. "You know how it is, we joke around. We don't mean any harm ... double quotes." Fernanda appeared shortly after, with a forced smile. "Marcus, that's amazing. Can you give me some investment tips?" The same person who had called me a beggar a few days earlier now wanted financial advice. "Of course, Fernanda. The first tip is, stop spending money you don't have to impress people who don't care about you. Carlos and Amanda kept their distance, clearly embarrassed. I noticed that Carlos had removed his Rolex. He probably realized that showing off a watch financed for someone with $2.3 million in the bank was embarrassing. Amanda completely avoided eye contact. The next day, the office dynamic changed dramatically. The jokes about my car stopped immediately. Instead, I was now receiving compliments about my financial intelligence and inspiring humility. People who had previously ignored me began greeting me in the hallway. During lunch, a small crowd gathered around me. Everyone wanted to know how I started investing, which stocks I recommended, and how I managed to accumulate so much money. I answered all their questions patiently, but always emphasizing that the secret was discipline and consistency, not luck. Ricardo tried to approach me again. "Marcus, would you like a coffee after work? I'd like to talk about investments." I looked at him and replied, "Sure, Ricardo. But this time you're paying, since I'm just a guy with a poor man's cart, remember?" He turned red with embarrassment. Fernanda also tried to make amends. "Marcus, I'm sorry for the comments that day. I was being stupid." I accepted the apology, but made it clear, "Fernanda, the problem wasn't the comments about my car. The problem was the disrespect and arrogance. Money can't buy education." Revenge was sweeter than I'd imagined. Seeing those faces that had once displayed superiority now show respect and even envy was deeply satisfying. But the best was yet to come. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from my revelation spread like wildfire through the company. The story of the humble employee who was secretly a millionaire became a corporate legend. Employees from other departments came to me for advice, and even directors began treating me with more respect. But the most interesting changes happened to the group that had humiliated me. Ricardo, who always bragged about his financed Tesla, began avoiding conversations about cars. I learned from colleagues that he was considering trading in his Model S for something more modest to improve cash flow. The irony was delicious. Fernanda had a complete existential crisis. The woman who mocked my lack of standards began to question her own spending habits. She sold her Louis Vuitton bag and started attending financial literacy seminars. A transformation I never imagined possible. Carlos was the most affected psychologically. The man who flaunted his Rolex as a symbol of success discovered he was working alongside someone who could buy 10 identical watches without batting an eye. He began experiencing anxiety, tax, and even considered requesting a transfer to another department. Amanda, always the cruelest with her words, became the most subservient. She began to praise me excessively, offering to help with anything I needed. The transformation was so radical it was embarrassing. From stalker to sycophant in a matter of weeks. But the most significant change occurred in the overall office culture. Conversations about expensive cars, designer clothes, and ostentatious displays drastically diminished. People began talking about investments, financial literacy, and planning for the future. I had inadvertently changed the mindset of an entire workplace. The irony of all this is that I remained exactly the same car, same clothes, same lunchbox. The only difference is that now everyone knew these choices were intentional, not due to financial constraints. My simple lifestyle went from being a laughingstock to an example to be followed. A month after the revelation, I received an unexpected proposal. The company's CFO, Mr. Wilson, called me in for a private conversation. "Marcus, I'm impressed with your investment knowledge. How about taking on an in-house consulting role for our employees?" It could be a well-paying side project. It was the professional recognition I'd always sought, but it only came after my financial situation was revealed. I accepted the offer, not for the money I already had enough but for the opportunity to educate others about responsible investing. The revenge was complete, but best of all, it brought positive results for many people. Sometimes, humiliation is exactly what some people need to wake up. 3 months after the revelation, the office was a completely different environment. What had previously been a place of ostentation and status competition had become a hub for discussions about financial literacy and smart investing. I had unwittingly become the company's unofficial financial guru. My in-house investment consulting program became the most popular program among employees. Every Friday, the auditorium was packed with people wanting to learn about stocks, real estate funds, and retirement planning. It was gratifying to see colleagues who previously spent everything on frivolous things now saving and investing consciously. Ricardo underwent the most radical transformation. The man who flaunted his Tesla and ridiculed my Honda sold his car and bought a used Corolla. With the money left, he opened his first brokerage account. "Marcus," he said to me one day, "you made me realize I was living a financial lie." Fernanda also changed drastically. She canceled all her credit cards, sold expensive clothes and accessories she barely wore, and started investing 40% of her monthly salary. Within 6 months, she had a $15,000 portfolio, more money invested than she ever imagined. Carlos was the one who took the longest to accept the new reality. He spent weeks avoiding speaking to me, clearly embarrassed by the humiliation he had caused me. But eventually, he approached me, offered a genuine apology, and began attending my lectures. He sold his Rolex and invested the money in dividend stocks. Amanda, who had always been the most vocal critic, became my biggest advocate in the office. She began telling new employees about the lesson in humility she learned from me. Never judge anyone by their appearance became her personal mantra. But the change I was most proud of was cultural. The company parking lot, which once resembled a luxury car dealership, now had a much wider variety of vehicles. Employees realized they didn't need to go into debt to impress their colleagues. Practical, fuel-efficient cars became respected choices. Coffee conversations changed completely. Instead of discussing expensive purchases and splurges, people talked about investment goals, retirement strategies, and financial education for their children. It was as if the entire company had awakened from a consumerist dream. The board was so impressed with the positive change in the workplace that they decided to formalize a financial education program. I was promoted to senior financial consultant with a significant salary increase and the responsibility of implementing the program across all company branches. Ironically, the humiliation I suffered at the company party turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me professionally. Not only did I get revenge on the arrogant people who disrespected me, but I also helped dozens of people transform their financial lives. My 2015 Honda Civic remained a faithful parking spot, but now it was viewed with respect and admiration. Some new employees even asked me if I'd recommend that particular model to those just starting out in finance. This story completely changed my perspective on revenge and humility. What began as a plan to humiliate arrogant people turned into something much bigger, a life lesson that positively impacted dozens of families. Today, 2 years after that fateful party, my investment portfolio has surpassed $3 million. But more importantly, I've helped over 150 company employees begin their investment journeys. Some have already accumulated over $50,000, others are paying off debt and building emergency funds. Ricardo became one of my best students and today has a respectable portfolio worth $80,000. Fernanda paid off her house and is planning for early retirement. Carlos overcame his anxiety issues and discovered a passion for stock analysis. Amanda became a speaker on financial education at other companies. The greatest lesson I've learned is that true wealth isn't about showing off what you have, but about having the freedom that money well spent can provide. My Honda Civic still gets me everywhere I need to go, but now I could buy an entire fleet if I wanted. If this story inspired you in any way, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been in a similar situation? How would you deal with arrogant people at work? And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our stories of drama and revenge.